Jeopardy!
Yeah, when Jesse started to ask me to line up some people that I thought would have an impact on recreation or have had an impact on recreation in Illinois, Kerri Schiller came immediately to mind. She is a budding researcher. Very soon she's going to have a doctorate in recreation from the University of Illinois, and it's going to be specifically focused on play and play for adults.
Why do you study play in adulthood?
I study play pretty much by accident, largely because I kind of stumbled upon something that I thought was very interesting, and I realized that there's seems to be very little interest in the academic world in play in adulthood. So the way that I stumbled on this...
Because they like to work a lot?
They like to work a lot, and they're very serious.
Serious part.
And they do important work, but to me...
They're supposed to help people have fun, right?
Well, to me, play, when I think about play, and when I think especially about like the way kids play, to my mind, play is largely just about like what is really fun for you. Really, nobody was studying play in adulthood as their primary thing. There were a few people doing little side projects, but nobody seemed interested. And
so you were like, wait a minute, there's a hole here.
There's definitely a big gap here, and that when I had the opportunity to come here and study play in adulthood, I couldn't say no.
What was it that piqued your curiosity?
I was working for the YMCA in 2010, and it just so happened that probably my whole adult life I had, when the Parks and... I love to look at the Parks and Rec catalog when it came to my house, because I was like, what cool things are going on that I would do? And I would look at it and I'd be like, oh, that looks really cool. Oh, wait, that's for kids. Okay, well, I'm not a kid.
Oh, you would like look at the age thing.
Yeah.
Oh, sad.
It was sad. And you know what? I wasn't that age, maybe only in my heart, but they weren't going to let me into the program. I didn't have kids who could participate.
So then you looked weird.
So then
a friend and I talked about this after our kids aged out of some things. I'm like, I still want to go to library story time, but I'm not going to go by myself.
Right, because people would think that's really weird,
right.
And it'd be really uncomfortable for you. So, I had those thoughts for a long time, but one day when I was working at the Y, I was talking to a member who had kids, and she had been shopping for summer activities for kids to do. And we kind of had the same, all of a sudden we had this conversation, and we both kind of went, that sounds really fun. Like, I wish I could do that.
What did you do about the gap you found in programming?
After this conversation, I just started to get to think about it. I don't know exactly how it all transpired. I don't remember all of the details. But what ended up happening is I approached my boss. Could I not teach isn't the right word, lead a play class? And so I started this class that eventually became known as Recess for Adults. I put it out there. It took a while, to get enough people that we could have good games going on, but people were coming. I was having fun, and that's really all I was hoping to get out of it. But
selfishly, yeah.
Selfishly is all about me.
What did you notice while leading Recess for Adults?
But I would notice that on days when I had recess, very often I would come out in a dramatically better, more optimistic mood.
Just going there?
No,
or
not
after?
Necessarily going there.
Okay.
But afterwards.
After. Okay, that makes sense.
I felt like something had been, a dark cloud had been lifted, and I felt more happier and more able to do what I needed to do I had regular adult responsibilities for the rest of the day, work.
And did it seem like the other participants did as well, or didn't you really ask them at that point?
I don't know that I really asked them about it, but I also saw them laughing in a way that I didn't, and interacting in a way that I didn't see them necessarily doing in the other kinds of activities that we offered. So, if you go to, I love yoga.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to laugh.
I don't love
yoga.
kickboxing, but a lot of people like kickboxing. I understand all the benefits of exercise and doing things like that.
Different kind of stress relief.
A different kind of stress relief, and it didn't. I wasn't seeing the same kind of laughter and joy, and people connecting, even because when you go to yoga or when you go to kickboxing, you might even be next to the same person that you see in class for the last 5 years, but you don't necessarily interact with that person. Well, when you're playing tag or when you're playing Foursquare or whatever you're playing, you can't, as we said before, you can't play alone. You have to interact, even if it's only as much as tagging you. We're interacting by the nature of it. I would see people come in. No, you're it. Uh-oh.
I'll hold it for a little bit.
Yeah, time.
I'm on tea.
I saw people come in and interact and talk with each other, even at the beginning of class, in a way that I didn't necessarily see in the other classes. And all of those things I thought were really interesting.
How could a park district mimic your Recess for Adults class?
Most people think about doing play for grown-ups. They do it just like they would do play for kids. Grown-ups have different barriers to play. Kids, as far as I can see, kids don't feel self-conscious about playing or dressing up in costumes or going out and chasing each other around the yard. Grown-ups, we've learned that might not be socially acceptable. So you have to, I think one of the things, and you know what, some people don't have a lot of inhibitions. And some people are just going to be willing no matter what. They're not worried about looking stupid. But I think a lot of adults, including myself sometimes, you think, what are other people going to think if I jump in to this thing? Are other people going to judge me? Are they going to think I'm stupid or immature? So you have to create an environment where people can feel safe to do something that's not always socially acceptable. I've learned a lot from the new games movement. So one of the books called Best New Games that has been hugely influential on me says your facilitator has to be willing to be the first one to do something that might seem silly or stupid.
So the facilitator has to
make the action. Has to be willing to do whatever the participants are doing, no matter how stupid it is, so that they know. It kind of gives the sense of, okay, well, Kerri, who's my facilitator, just made a ridiculous idiot out of herself or took that risk to do that. And so I know I'm not going to be the only one here who might look silly.
Yeah, because she already did.
I'd be perfect for this. I'm really good at making an idiot
well, there you
myself,
go.
So.
I had people in my class everywhere from 18 was the minimum age to over 70 years old who participated. One of the challenging things about that is to maintain kind of an even playing field so that if you have an 18-year-old and a 70-year-old, probably the 18-year-old is going to be way faster and more agile. And so how do you make that fun for people with very different abilities? There's some different things you can do, but one of the really common things that I did most of the time was we had a no running rule. So it did a couple things. It evens the playing field a little bit, and it reduces the risk of injuries a little bit.
How about specific games? What are some specific ones that you think that they should try, or specific activities?
Different versions of tag games. Foursquare really works pretty well. You're not moving around a lot, and even that you can make some adaptations. One of my favorites is actually an adaptation of Foursquare. It's we play Foursquare volleyball, but with a beach ball. So the idea is to keep, instead of smashing it onto the floor, when it comes in your square, you try to hit the beach ball into somebody else's square. And to me it's amazing, some of the games that just sound really simple. And actually I've had multiple times I've had this happen where I read a description of a game and I think, well, it doesn't sound like that much fun, but I need a new game to try. The best example of that is group juggle. It's something I was just looking for, something new to add. I tried it with my group, and it turned into one of those things that when I did not include the game in the class session, they would say, well, aren't we doing group juggle?
Group juggle then.
Because I would always...
I want to play kickball.
Yeah, exactly. and it's basically just a game where everybody stands in a circle and we're all throwing balls to each other.
How do you like to play?
When I was a kid, I used to love to get dressed up for Halloween. Like, that was one of my favorite holidays. I love dressing up in costume. Well, as a grown-up, that's not really
Wait
okay
a minute.
unless
You've showed up at our house
that was
in something. What was
cow.
it?
It was
it
a
was a
cow
cow costume.
Yep.
So-
With a printout of my face.
it was.
My face. I look out the window and I
Okay,
see my
busted.
face out the window in a cow costume.
Sorry.
All right,
Had to
so
call you out.
I made that happen for myself, I guess.
So sometimes you can make play happen for yourself.
Sometimes you can make play happen for yourself, but I know you guys, and I feel safe with you
Because
guys.
it's socially acceptable
It's
in our
socially
group.
acceptable
Yeah.
in this group. Now, would I just go to, a little kid could go to the grocery store in their costume.
And they do.
And they'd be like, that's just a little kid having fun.
Yeah.
Now, can I go to the grocery store in my cow onesie?
No.
Well, I can.
They might call
But
the
they might call the police on me or maybe send me for psychiatric treatment. So, anyway, I had all
Maybe
these
that'll be our next video.
psychiatric treatment.
No.
It's going to be October. We'll be able to dress
No,
up.
following Kerri through Aldi with
Like
cow
wear my bee
costume.
costume.
Yeah.
We could be animals.
Adults in costumes.
It could be a good, a really
It could.
interesting experiment.
We could go to a
anyway.
rec center and do it.
What does our culture teach us about play in adulthood?
I think our culture teaches us that it's not appropriate for grown-ups to
Show
do
up at
certain
the grocery store.
Show up at the grocery
Yeah.
store in your cow onesie.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, if you drop an adult in the City Museum in St. Louis,
Right.
they'll want to go back immediately.
Exactly.
Because of the amazing time they had on the adult playground.
Right.
That's true.
So there are certain places, and that's also something that's very
appropriate.
interesting to me, where they've made it feel safer and more appropriate
Yeah.
for grown-ups, because I love the slides at City Museum, right? I wish that we had something like that here in town where there was a slide that was that I felt like it was socially acceptable for me to use the slide just as much as the 3-year-old
Yeah.
who's over here, that's sized for me, right? I'm not a big person, but if I was much bigger, I wouldn't fit on most of those
Right.
slides. They have this very cool playground in Seattle at Seattle Center.
Yeah, we were there because of your your recommendation, actually.
It's amazing.
So my wife and I went there shortly after it opened when we were still living in Seattle, and it was amazing to look at. There were all kinds of people, kids crawling on it. We're like, oh my gosh, we have to get on this thing. We started climbing on one of the structures, and a police officer came over to us and told us that if we didn't have a child with us there, that we weren't allowed to
Get
use
out.
the playground and we had to get off.
So sad.
And it was very sad.
Because that playground is even sized. That kind of reminds me of the one up in at Maggie Daly. It's sized more
Oh, yeah.
adult appropriate.
Yeah.
Than some of the
Yes.
town playgrounds.
Yeah.
Well, I think
right.
we're just
good.
about out of time, right?
Yes.
So
Thank you, Kerri.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having me in your awesome treehouse.
Yes.
we're going to
It's been
definitely
great.
highlight Kerri's contact information. If you want to get in touch with her about anything she talked about, some of the books
Yeah.
she referenced or games, she'd be more than happy to share, I'm
Yes,
sure, right?
I would absolutely.
Yay. Oh, does that mean I'm it?
now.
She's
It means you're it.
crap. Good job, everybody. All right, now we can cut
Thanks,
everything
Kerri.
off.
All right.
Thanks.